Hello, I'm Rob Abbott. I'm the clinical supervisor at the Community Schools Mental Health Program of the community schools on the Lane campus. And this is a short session introducing DBT Steps A, which is a pilot SEL initiative of the community schools on the Lane campus. So a little bit before we get into DBT Steps A about the Community Schools Mental Health Program, we're now in our second year as both the lead CBO and the mental health provider to the community schools on the campus. You can see there that graphic that you probably recognize that the DOE puts out about all the elements of what makes a great school, and the arrows that go to the parts of that the community schools mental health program particularly supports, which includes building a supportive environment and creating strong community and family ties. The mental health program is one element of what happens within the community schools model to support whole child and whole family. We partner with all three community schools on the campus, Cypress, Lab. Our approach is a proactive, integrative with the schools and families and strength-based approach to mental health. The staffing includes school-based staff and interns, both BSW and MSW interns, and it's under all three, the staff at all the schools are under the supervision of the community schools director, who is Barbara, and the clinical supervisor, who's myself, Rob. And the staffing model and the referral process to the community schools mental health program varies by school. So a little bit about school mental health. So first, why school mental health? Why have mental health resources within schools and not just in communities? A couple of compelling reasons. One is the prevalence of mental health symptoms among children. 10% of children in the United States display signs of struggles with mental health, and 20%, 1 in 5% of children below the poverty line have signs and symptoms of struggles with mental health. Second is the impact. So there's very clear research that shows that undiagnosed, untreated mental illness leads to poor quality of life, to lost productivity over a lifetime, to destabilization of communities, and to higher rates of service utilization over time. And finally, equity and access. The people who don't have adequate access to mental health services and resources include people who are living in poverty, people who are immigrants, people who are of color. Think about our students and think about the fact that the one place you can find young people is at school. So placing mental health resources within schools is addressing directly, increasing access, and building equity. Also, how? So now that we know that really there's consensus about a few fundamentals of how to do school mental health well. One is in partnership, schools and communities working together. Here's a quote from the New York State Office of Mental Health. Partnerships that address the mental health and developmental needs of children is one of the key strategies for improving the learning environment and academic performance. And secondly, school mental health that is delivered in a three-tier model is school mental health that's being done effectively. There's a bunch of versions of that three-tiered model. I like this particular one that's on this slide because it includes action verbs about what's happening in each of the tiers. So if you look at the bottom tier, that's the universal tier. That's for everybody, students, staff, families, community partners working together to promote mental health wellness. And you do that by creating welcoming environments, by including everybody, by building understanding, mental health literacy, and knowing your student population well, promoting mental health wellness across the stakeholders, and partnering across the school community family. The second tier, which is the tier for at-risk students, what's happening at that tier is prevention, looking to really prevent the development of mental illness by working with students in an early stage, supporting students in their functioning, in their lives holistically, and bolstering by building skills and resiliency. And finally, at the top, students who are at high risk, whose struggles are really affecting their functioning. That's when you really want to intervene, make referrals to programs like ours, the Community Schools Mental Health Program, to Northwell, to external providers, working closely with guidance to intervene with those students in a formal way. One-on-one counseling, group counseling, other interventions. Big takeaway around school mental health in general, if a lot of this is a Charlie Brown teacher wah, wah, wah voice, the one thing I hope you walk away from this short presentation is that the cultivation of mental health wellness is a universal responsibility. All stakeholders all have to work together, including students supporting each other and themselves, and that for all of us, mental health wellness is a basic function of self-care. Moving on. So, Cypress Sales LDC as the community partner for the community schools on the campus, and we're 1 year in as the mental health provider. Why have we decided to bring on a pilot SEL initiative in the form of a curriculum? It's a couple of reasons. So a year of doing this work on the mental health side has given us an opportunity to assess student needs. And we see a critical mass of challenges on campus. So this pyramid is a depiction of the mechanism by which adverse childhood experiences, which is sort of the fundamental research around the trauma experience. As you're doing the TREP training, you're probably hearing about that, and how that influences health and well-being throughout the lifespan. So you'll see in the three bottoms in the grayscale area, think about your students as I'm going through this. So a foundational experience is the experience of generational embodiment and historical trauma. Think about systemic racism. Think about the experience of generational poverty. Think about the impact of immigration policies on our students and families. Moving up from that is social conditions and local context. So think about what our families and students are experiencing in terms of food insecurity, housing insecurity, poverty, the impact of policing, of crime. And then think about your students and the stories that you are hearing from them about their lives, about what they've experienced in their growing up years and in their current lives, and how many of them have had or are having adverse childhood experiences that are predictive of struggles. Moving up into the green, you're beginning to see the impacts of those bottom tiers on this pyramid, which is when you have adverse childhood experiences, and particularly multiple adverse childhood experiences, you begin to see disruptive neurodevelopment. That impacts social, emotional, and cognitive development. When young people have those struggles, they then adopt health risk behaviors to help them cope maladaptively. That impacts the development of disease, disability, and social problems, which can lead to early death. It is a sobering story, but one obviously as a school community that we need to contend with. So then we thought, so what do we do? What do we do about the critical, the massive challenges that we're seeing on campus, particularly in our current conditions with the pandemic? And we thought about, where are our strengths? How do we leverage strengths? One of the strengths that we have is the adolescent brain. We know from current neuroscience that the human brain is plastic. It is flexible. It continues to grow and change throughout the lifespan. And the period in which it is growing most powerfully and is most flexible is during the period of adolescence. Adolescents is a time of change. Adolescents have been at the forefront of social movements throughout history because they are able and willing to embrace change, right? So how do we leverage that capacity of the adolescent brain to take on new things? And another strength we have on campus is partnership. We work together across so many multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder ways in support of students. So how do we leverage that so that we can bring in resources that are not just about what one community school mental health staff person is doing with one student in a counseling session, but how do we get multiple adults and young people working together to get information and support to young people individually, in small groups, in classrooms, right? To really get resiliency built all over the place. Finally, we looked at ourselves. We self-assessed as a program, and we see some strengths. Cypress Hills Local Development Corporation is a community-led organization. We have 35 plus years of expertise in the communities of Cypress Hills and East New York. So we know a little bit about the communities that young people are living in. We have experience in partnership. So much of what we do is in school community partnership over time. And we're grounded as an agency in positive youth development. Where do we see our growing edge? We're a multi-services community-based organization. We are not a mental health organization. We've taken this on in partnership. It seemed the right thing to do. And we know that we have to grow our capacity in mental health. So what's our next step? We saw our next step as really grounding ourselves in a foundation, really taking on a professional foundation. So we went looking for an evidence-based approach that's rooted in current neuroscience and strong clinical practice, and that's going to provide us across our school community partnership a set of common assumptions, common language that can be implemented across all three tiers of school mental health in partnership. So what do we choose? Chose DBT Steps A. So here's a few basic facts about DBT Steps A. So it stands for Dialectical Behavioral Therapy Skills Training for Emotional Problem Solving for Adolescents, DBT Steps A. It's developed by a Seattle-based husband-wife team of psychologists, Jim Mazza and Liz Dexter Mazza, who both have expertise in adolescent mental health, school psychology, and parent coaching, and they both have a common interest and focus on suicide prevention. That's where they come from. And they're the people who both developed the training and trained us on it. The whole program is adapted from the skills training program in dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a therapeutic modality developed by Dr. Marsha Linehan. It's designed the curriculum for middle and high school students in order to teach emotional regulation, decision-making skills, and problem-solving skills. It can be implemented across the tiers, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, using a multi-tiered systems of support, which we have in place at all three community schools. It includes 30 lessons that are designed to fit within a general education curriculum. You do not have to be a clinician to deliver this curriculum, and each lesson is 50 minutes long. And finally, it covers the DBT skills, the things that DBT grounds people in, which is goal setting, dialectical thinking, mindfulness, distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about DBT before we get into the curriculum. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so DBT, what is that? So first of all, it is a recent therapeutic approach developed in the late 1980s by this Dr. Marshall Linehan. And it was developed initially for people with personality disorders who are at risk of suicide. And over this last period of decades, it's shown a lot of benefit for that population. And here's the key, for more general population of people. DBT, compared to earlier approaches to therapy, prioritizes promotion of health and well-being over the reduction of symptoms. It incorporates as an approach acceptance, mindfulness, values, and spirituality. So in some ways, it's nothing new under the sun. This is many aspects are grounded in spiritual traditions that are thousands of years old. So it's science plus spirituality. It focuses on how a person relates to thoughts and feelings rather than the content of thoughts and feelings. It's about how we relate to our thoughts and feelings. And finally, here is a fundamental aspect of DBT for our purposes, which is that it is skills-based. It's about the how of doing mindfulness, tolerating distress, regulating your emotions, and developing interpersonal effectiveness. The first two of those, mindfulness and distress tolerance, are about accepting reality as it is, dealing with it. And the last two are about embracing needed changes, acceptance and change. So some key concepts in DBT. And before we do that, actually, I want to have Dr. Marshall Linehan talk for a second, about 2 minutes, about why she founded DBT, and then we'll go into these key concepts.
I started working with highly suicidal people. As it turned out, the people met criteria for borderline personality disorder, but A, I had never heard of borderline personality disorder, and B, I didn't know what it was. Even if you told me the name, I wouldn't have known. So that was the beginning of the whole thing. I had no idea what I was doing, except that I was studying suicide. What happened was standard behavior therapy of the 1970s and early 1980 blew up. And the main reason it did is because what it requires for it to work is for a person to come in and you be able to say, okay, here's the problem and here's what we'll do to change it. And for the person to say, okay, I'll try that. But the people I was dealing with immediately said, you're saying I'm the problem. And so they were so sensitive to any invalidation or statement that they were the problem that the treatment blew up. And they would either get angry at me, hide behind a chair, storm out, quit therapy, yell and scream, cry, or say they're going to kill themselves. So it didn't take me too long to figure out this was not going to work out. So I thought, okay, we're going to switch to a more acceptance-based treatment. So I'm going to validate and be very accepting. So I tried that. That blew up also, because then the patient said, you mean you're not going to help me? You're just going to listen to me? Most of the patients I treat have already been through a whole lot of therapy where you talk, get listened to, and understood. The problem is talking, being listened to, and being understood doesn't necessarily make anything change. So then they got really upset with me because I wasn't helping them change. So that's when I realized that I had to pull together a major emphasis on change with a technology of acceptance. So I had a technology of change, now I need a technology of acceptance. The technology of acceptance primarily was validation. So it's behavior therapy with a huge amount of validation. So problem solving, validation are the core components of the treatment.
Okay, key concepts in DBT. Dialectical. So dialectics is a philosophical term, and it refers to the fact that there's always more than one way to see a situation and solve a problem. And think about our students as we talk about this, and students developing the skills and the confidence to be able to accept and understand that change is always constant, and that two things that seem or are opposites can both be true. DBT is about acceptance and change, about the middle path, holding in your brain that you can both accept that I'm trying my hardest, and holding your brain at the same time, I can do better. This is where we're looking to get. The students can find and stick to over time that middle path. I'm trying my hardest and I can do better. Another way of looking at that is wise mind, right? This is what DBT provides in terms of perspective and, again, how you do it. Finding yourself in wise mind. So understanding and knowing what emotion mind is and being able to recognize that. Road rage is kind of like the classic example, right? You're on the Belt Parkway and somebody just cut you off, and kind of the kind of mind you tend to get into, and the bad decisions it can lead you to make, right? Understanding, like, okay, yeah, that's emotion mind, recognize it, right? It's about relating to feelings. And rational mind, right? There are times when we actually are pretty much in rational mind. We're taking an algebra test or something like that, which is great for algebra. It's not so great for relating to other people, right? Not only. What we want to get to is wise mind, right? Which actually helps us access intuitive thinking, really having a sense of what is the best course of action here in a situation where two or more things may seem like that are opposites can both be true, right? This is reality. This is what we have to deal with. And that ability to access and develop and stay in wise mind is what DBT is about. Finally, DBT is really helpful in terms of how to understand and relate to emotions, how to name them, and by naming them, taming them. How to understand that there are secondary and primary emotions, and secondary emotions follow primary emotions. For instance, feeling shame after you get angry, right? Or feeling judgmental after you get sad, right? You're sad because your partner didn't get home in time to have a nice meal with you and watch your appointment TV. And then when your partner gets home, instead of saying, "Oh, I missed you, I'm really disappointed," you say, "Why are you always late? You always do this to me." And you have a big fight, and you part unhappy, as opposed to being able to enjoy at least the latter part of the evening by staying in your primary emotion. Okay, let's move on a little bit and actually talk a little bit about the curriculum. So DBT is a skills-based curriculum, and a lot of those skills are delivered in mnemonic devices. So it's a way to kind of really hold on. So just an example of a couple of the many skills that over the course of those 30 lessons that students will learn about, practice, reflect on, and incorporate. So here, for instance, is a distress tolerance skill. This is a set of skills that you can incorporate when you are at a crisis level. You're feeling really upset or really angry or really agitated and at risk of doing or saying something that's going to make that situation worse, right? So you can incorporate in that situation tip skills. These are skills that actually change your body chemistry. So one, for instance, temperature. If you are in an agitated state and you go to your refrigerator and you get ice packs or ice, and you rub ice across your forehead or hold those ice packs in your hand over a period of minutes, that shift in your body temperature will change your physiology and will bring your agitation down. You'll become calmer. so that you can then incorporate a skill that'll help you stay calmer over a longer period of time and avoid making the situation worse because you do or say something that is not going to be constructive. Another way to do that is intense exercise. Up and down the stairs, speed walking around the block a couple of times, whatever that is, for a specific period of time. Intense exercise until you calm down will change your physiology and bring you to a calmer state. And also paced breathing, right? So 5 seconds in, hold for 6, 7 seconds out, hold for 6, 5 seconds in, hold for 6, 7 seconds out. 5, 6, 7. Just one example of how to do paced breathing, and doing that consistently until your physiology responds to that paced breathing, and bringing yourself to a more grounded state will help you be able to access better thinking over time. That's an example. Let's move on to another. So this is an example of an emotional regulation skill. So ABC, please, is the mnemonic. And it is focused on how to increase positive emotions and reduce vulnerability to emotion mind. So these are skills that you can incorporate to really actually help you stay in wise mind for the long haul. And there's a set of them. I'm not going to go into these in detail because we're not doing the lesson here. But those skills are accumulating positive experiences, building mastery, coping ahead of time with emotional situations, treating physical illness, balanced eating, avoiding mood altering drugs, balancing sleep, getting exercise. This particular mnemonic is delivered over the course of 2 of those 30 lessons. And obviously, students both learn about and then will practice those lessons. So I think we have one more example of the mnemonic. So again, another domain, interpersonal effectiveness. This set of skills, which are Dear Man is the mnemonic, is about students being able to understand the skills of being able to ask for what they want or need effectively in interacting with the teacher, interacting with parents, interacting with the peer. And there are a set of skills here about how you describe the situation, express what you need in that situation, appropriately assert what you're wanting, reinforce that assertion, stay mindful and present, right? Like, not getting agitated by bringing up past things or being anxious about the future, but really staying in the moment with the person that you're interacting with, appearing confident and negotiating, and how to do that effectively so it's not a win-lose, it's a win-win, and also understanding that you're in a process with somebody else, that you both want something and there's somebody else there who has their own thoughts and perspective on that situation. Okay, so let's move on from some of those examples. The other thing about the lessons, right, is that the lessons delivered, and this is an example of a diary card, and this is about what students are taking out into the world, right? They've gotten the lesson. The homework is to practice, right? To practice the skills, to recognize the situations in which those skills can be incorporated, and reflect on, really simply, whether you have practiced that skill or not. And the answer may be that you did it. The answer may be that you tried it, but it wasn't effective. Then maybe the answer is that, on one day you tried it, one day you didn't. When a student is filling out a diary card, they're not filling out this whole card, mostly working on one skill at a time, right? You're working on tip, or you're working on Dear Man. So really, when you're doing this on any one day, you're going to see a set of numbers across those dates, just for 1 or 2 of those skills, particularly as we start. And that's key, right? It is about delivering the lesson, practicing and reflecting, just like so much of the scaffolded learning we're doing, but this is about social emotional competencies. Okay, let's move on. So where does DBT Steps A fit in the SEL landscape? It doesn't replace existing SEL initiatives or tools within our schools. Um, we went for, first of all, I mentioned that it's evidence-based. So I just want to, this is an example of a fairly recent study, June 2018, in which data was collected at the beginning and end of an academic year. This is actually in Ireland. From students who participated in DBT Steps A as a group, and you can see that there is a statistically significant treatment effect that's observed in that study. DBT, so a couple of the SEL resources that we use on campus, restorative justice, for instance. DBT is more individually focused than restorative justice. And if you think about through DBT, the information and skills dissemination in dialectical thinking, that ability to hold two things in your mind that may not seem like they go together, and that ability to access and stay in wise mind, you can see how that actually might be useful and support effective restorative justice. Ruler is another SEL approach, SEL curriculum that's present on campus. DBT overlaps with Ruler. There's that concept of the mood meter in Ruler. And mood meter will actually be really helpful in helping students in incorporating appropriate DBT skills because it really gives you a sense of where you are emotionally, right? The emphasis in DBT on the how skills, because it's incorporated in a longstanding therapeutic modality, extends the emotional literacy that's developed in Ruler because it's skills-based and it's based in a longstanding therapeutic modality that has a lot of clinical practice behind it. And there may be others that we can talk about over time about how DBT can fit with and work with and support existing SEL initiatives on campus. And finally, last slide, we're in our pilot year of DBT Steps A. 30 people across all three schools, the community school staff, and the Northwell Health Center staff were trained in June of 2020. It was 18 hours of training over 3 days. It was pretty intense. The curriculum developers, as I said, Jim Mazza and Liz Dexter Mazza were our trainers. The curriculum, really helpfully and excitingly is available in English and Spanish. We're getting ongoing consultation from our trainers. We're connected to schools across the country through a learning community. The implementation of DBT Steps A is going to vary across multi, Cypress, and lab based on the school's needs and decision about how to incorporate this pilot initiative this year. There is a general shared focus on the early grades, but again, it'll vary by school. Planning got underway in June, and we are working really hard to get this resource into the hands of students and teachers. So we think it's actually going to be helpful and effective. And we're very open to questions. I'm Rob, again, I'm available. Work really closely with all three schools and happy to hear from anybody who would like to hear more about DBT Steps A, and look forward to working with all three schools in this pilot initiative this year. Thanks so much.